The flight simulation compound buzzed with its usual pre-dawn energy by 6 a.m., glass doors clattering shut behind each arriving pilot. Rachel Quinn adjusted her flight suit collar and tucked her gloves into her belt, standing near the back of the main briefing room just left of the coffee dispenser. She didn't lean against the wall or cross her arms. She simply stood, watching the screen at the front cycle through heat map renderings and terrain overlays. Most of the data had been built from files Rachel recognized intimately. She had helped construct the original scenario months ago, a training simulation they now called Canyon Loop. Every angle of the maneuver, every trigger threshold buried. In the sim's telemetry, she knew them all. But this morning, her name wasn't even on the list. The names of the slotted pilots scrolled across the left panel in bright white text. Marcus Talon Rodriguez, Jessica Viper Thompson, Brandon Hawk Johnson. Each name carried a color-coded timestamp and designated Vector Run, Rachel's name. Had been there earlier that week, tagged as Sim Support. Now it was gone. Across the room, Marcus lifted a protein shake to his lips and said something to Jessica under his breath. She laughed without turning her head. Brandon stood a few steps in front of them, reviewing his loadout on a shoulder screen, his tone louder than necessary. If we don't hit 9.5 on the first arc, we may as well stay grounded. Loop's too shallow otherwise. You'll end up flat spinning into reset. One of the younger candidates nearby nodded like he understood. Rachel didn't. Move, she had heard it all before. The shape of the canyon loop required not just power and entry speed, but a pressure hold at 9.6 G for a full second longer than what most sim pilots could handle without fading out or losing the lock. The shape alone wasn't the challenge. It was sustaining through the turn while keeping sensor line and thrust offset in perfect balance. At the front of the room, Controller Davis, short and steady-voiced, adjusted his mic. Final sim window begins in 21 minutes. Canyon loop. Intercept profile is set with live environmental variation. All runs must hold at 9.0 minimum to complete the trigger pass. If you drop below or pull early, the drone will breach containment. You'll get one attempt. No one looked toward Rachel. She didn't expect them to. Lieutenant Amanda Pierce, with dark curls tied in a low knot, passed by without a word and slipped a printout into Rachel's hand. Rachel unfolded it slowly. It was a terrain model of the loop path, the kind she had annotated herself back when they were still testing heat expansion models in low ridgeline scenarios. It had no author listed. No one ever attached her name to those sheets. "Observe only today," Amanda murmured, keeping her voice low enough not to carry. "They've got you at Ridge Station 4. No headset, just eyes on." Rachel nodded once, then folded the sheet again and slipped it into her suit's front panel. Amanda gave a faint, apologetic shrug, then moved back toward the flight console. Around them, the room continued its practiced energy. Jessica dropped into a chair near the front and kicked her boot up against the table leg. Marcus offered Brandon a stick of gum, and the two of them traded half-jokes about the humidity throwing. "Off hub decalibration." The jokes weren't funny, but they carried status. Davis resumed, "Heads up, mission thread will go dark for 9 seconds during deployment. You'll be flying blind through the lock corridor. That's when most candidates lose target." Rachel had written that timing. She remembered the exact frame skip rate in the sim log. She'd matched it against 6 real-world records and adjusted the lag field herself. It wasn't a glitch. It was the test. But none of them knew that. The screen flashed the first call sign. Brandon's name paired with Viper 2, launch at 0700, secondary at 071 Skeen. All others follow standard interval. Davis's voice remained calm. "Support personnel report to observation. If you're not assigned a headset, remain off-channel." Rachel turned and walked toward the hallway before anyone could point her out. Her boots made no more noise than anyone else's, but the silence around her seemed different. Not dramatic, just complete. The ridge station wasn't far, a quarter-mile. Walk across gravel and temporary matting, past a line of storm barriers stacked low against the edge of the flight path. The air was cool, dry, the wind too thin to carry scent. Rachel kept her eyes forward. 2 techs passed her going the opposite direction, one of them holding a tablet like it was hot. Neither looked up. When she reached the observation tent, no one greeted her. Inside, a row of folding chairs faced a wide viewport. There were scopes on pivot mounts, long lens recorders pointed toward the valley where the loop would execute. Rachel took a seat near the far end and opened the printout again. Her pen was tucked in her sleeve seam. She made a small mark near the left edge, noting the shift in sun angle since the terrain modeling had been logged. Her handwriting was small and exact. It didn't matter if anyone saw it. No one would ask. Outside, a shadow passed low and fast over the tent ceiling. Someone had started their engine pass early. Rachel didn't flinch. She looked down at the profile sheet one more time, then folded it neatly and tucked it under her leg. There was no headset laid out for her, no feed line, no identifier on the clipboard. She didn't need any of it. The loop wasn't theoretical for her. It never had been. She had solved it quietly, alone. And now, as the chatter built through the tent walls, as the roar of the first sim ramp-up hummed through the floor, she let herself blink once. Then she waited, knowing that in less than an hour, everything would change. The sim pods came to life before sunrise, long before the scheduled test pilots arrived. Fluorescent lights in the training bay buzzed with their usual low electric. Casting pale halos across the polished floor. Rachel always arrived by 5. No badge swipe, no official check-in. Amanda, the sim tech on morning rotation, had long since stopped asking questions. The access keycard was left under a data console each day, tucked into the lip of a diagnostic tray. Unspoken, it was a quiet allowance between two people who understood the difference between being included and being necessary. Rachel stepped into Pod 6 with a calm that came from ritual. The cockpit simulator was identical to the F-16 interface. Every dial mapped, every resistance lever precise to real-world tolerances. She settled in without ceremony. The door sealed behind her with a soft, hydraulic pull. Darkness took over for a moment, broken only by the blue pulse of the HUD initializing. She didn't flinch. She never did. The system accepted her Ghost ID without delay. Her screen blinked once, then welcomed a blank operator tag. No rank, no name, just the number she always entered at the prompt. 427. She had used it for weeks now. The logs fed straight into the archive, unfiled. No one had flagged it. Rachel adjusted the G-suit fitment slightly tighter at the hips, then ran a warm-up sequence at 7.5 G. The HUD pressure bar rolled clean, no feedback warnings. She tracked the canyon arc on the terrain model overlay. 53 seconds entry. To Apex, lock acquisition required at 29.7 seconds, target exposure for less than 4. She didn't blink. Her first loop of the day was methodical. Clean. A slight deviation at the rear throttle curve, she corrected on the second run. She leaned the angle 3 degrees tighter at 9.4 G. The HUD flashed yellow. She smiled faintly, then adjusted her oxygen modulator settings by 0.5%. By the 5th run, she held 9.6 G for 5 seconds. The lock stayed blue through the corridor. The drone target stayed in cone until the final arc dropped altitude. In a real-world sim, that would be a pass. She wanted more. Each session ran between 1 and 2 hours. She left no notes. She saved the telemetry files directly to her drive, which fit inside a case small enough to tuck behind her suit's chest. Plate. The telemetry held everything. G-load, pressure bleed, breath rhythm under load, micro-corrections to the stick during inverted offset. Every loop had a profile. Every profile had a flaw, except the last one. That one was perfect. In the quiet that followed her sessions, she often walked the length of the empty locker corridor just once, letting her eyes fall on the untouched name patches and framed commendation boards. There were no boards with her name. There were no ribbons to mark sim breakthroughs or loop timing reductions. The sim room never gave applause. But the numbers did not lie. She ran a pen along the inside of her helmet bag and checked the printed overlays one more time. The final sheet, annotated with her tight scroll in dark ink, held her best run. 9.6 G for 7.2 seconds, lock never broken, maneuver complete. She hadn't signed it. She never did. The data itself told the story. One morning during a double loop analysis, Rachel noticed someone standing just outside the pod window. A younger systems officer named Kevin was holding a diagnostic slate, watching her telemetry scroll in real time. His eyes followed the shifting axis markers as if he understood what he was seeing. She didn't pause the run. She held through the peak compression, let the flare timing play out, and exited clean. When the pod opened and she stepped out, Kevin didn't speak. He just nodded once, low and slow, then walked away. He never brought it up again. Back in her locker space, Rachel kept her things ordered by necessity, not vanity. Her name was etched faintly on the inside seam of her duffel, not printed, just carved there with a blunt stylus. A memory stick hung from a loop of red paracord. It held all 37 Canyon loop runs. She plugged it in every night. She reviewed the analytics line by line. She had no instructors, she corrected herself. Her gloves folded and tucked. Into the side panel had creases now at the index fingers where she had gripped the throttle too tightly during early drills. She had learned to let that go. You couldn't fight the arc. You had to ride it, let your breath fall into sync with the curve, let your lungs follow the pressure. She had memorized the moment when blackout tried to creep in. It was not about toughness. It was about timing. Oxygen, angle, blink rate, muscle release. She mapped it like a pulse chart. Amanda once left a small packet of electrolyte powder near the sim panel. No note, just the packet. It was strawberry. Rachel took it, without a word, and never mentioned it. On her way out, she left a telemetry stub behind, labeled Simrun 427 Loop 26. Amanda never filed it, but she kept it. They both knew what it meant. The official squadron flights never asked for outside data. When Brandon or Jessica reviewed their sim plans, they used only the default curves. They practiced for 9.0 G holds, maybe 9.1 on a strong day. Rachel watched them fly loose in the entry corridor, trusting autocorrect to keep them from stalling out. She had run the loop tighter than the curve allowed, twice, and survived both runs without auto-throttle assist. That detail never made it to briefing. In the end, she didn't train for approval. She trained because the maneuver demanded it. There were no shortcuts inside a Gmax corridor. You either flew it clean, or you failed. You either understood the shape of the loop, or you blacked out before the target flashed red. There was no middle. She knew that space better than anyone. She had built her way through it one silent morning at a time. And no one saw her. Not then, not yet. But the loop remembered, and so did the numbers. Inside the command tent, tension had begun to override rhythm. The air was still cool, but the mood was heating fast. Operators leaned over their terminals, tracking G readings and projected telemetry arcs. Everything was being logged in real time, each flight path a thread of possibility weaving through the larger simulation. A bank of monitors showed multi-angle feeds, cockpit views, trajectory overlays, and sensor locks that pulsed green, then yellow, then red. Controller Davis stood with his headset tilted just above one ear, his voice steady but clipped. He watched. The altitude window flash counting down the intercept window with quiet urgency. This was the point in the drill where either the maneuver worked or the drone breached the defense line. The canyon loop wasn't a visual flourish. It was the only maneuver fast enough to cut a swarm-style incursion off at the merge. That was the simulation, and it was already starting to slip. "Viper 2 approaching apex!" someone called out. That was Brandon. His F-16 was mid-loop, diving into the low corridor at 9.1 G, speed steady but just at the edge of red line. From the cockpit cam, his jaw was tight. His eyes flicked left, then blinked twice. Too long. 9-3, said a second voice. Telemetry spike, Davis muttered into his headset. On screen, Brandon's pressure readings jumped again. The arc bent early. His vitals spiked. He tried to hold the stick steady. 9.4 holding. No, wait. Compression drop. Visual loss. Blackout, said Davis. The screen flickered. Brandon's F-16 ejected from the sim scenario. The system logged it as a fail and reset his pilot feed to standby. His seat back in the sim bay was already empty by the time anyone looked up from the console. Silence took over the room for just a moment. Then Jessica keyed in from the secondary bay. Ghosting lead pass, rolling hot. Her tone was confident, maybe too confident. Her entry speed was high, aggressive, but the angle was off. She hit the loop late, forcing the sim to compress the vertical climb early. The drone lock drifted. Davis saw it before she did. She's wide. Lock loss at Corridor 3. Correction curves out of range. Burn through time? Someone asked. 4 seconds. She's missed it. The red flash on Jessica's HUD triggered early. She had overshot her trajectory, ended in a flare mark with no contact. Another failure. Davis looked at the screen that showed remaining slotted runs. Only Marcus remained. His call sign, Talon 1, was already transmitting. Talon 1 active, entry. He came in smooth. Right on the vector Rachel had written months ago. His G-curve was stable, not aggressive, but enough to approach the corridor clean. 9.0, then 9.1, then just under 9.2. He had the lock in view, but it was shallow. Vertical stutter, Davis said. Hold the curve. Someone muttered. Then Marcus's voice came over the channel, low and measured. I'm pulling out. The lock dissolved. The maneuver flattened. He dropped altitude and throttled out. What was that? Davis asked. I wasn't about to pass out chasing a drill, Marcus answered. No hit, a tech confirmed. The drone passed the threshold. On screen, the simulation logged a soft breach. The virtual drone crossed into the inner defense zone. Fail, no secondary runs available, no pilots left on the board. Davis exhaled through his teeth. The abort light began to pulse on the control panel. Operators exchanged looks. The sim had been built with an override buffer, but it would trigger breach confirmation unless someone re-entered the loop in less than 60 seconds. No one was cleared. Amanda, standing near the peripheral monitor, checked the file status. Every official pilot was locked out. The next reset window wasn't for another 20 minutes. Davis reached toward the abort switch. That was when the static broke. A voice, steady and quiet, entered the comm line. I have the vector. The operators all looked up at once. The voice hadn't come from any of the sim bays. There was no pilot listed as active. The comm line blinked green from Ridge Station 4. Davis pressed his headset tighter. Say again. Rachel's voice came through clearer this time. I said I have the vector. Who is this? Another controller snapped. You're not cleared. That zone's observer only. Target drone has breached level 1, Rachel said. I'm already airborne. At first, no one responded. The radar display began to populate a new heat signature coming in low from the left flank of the terrain map. It wasn't scheduled. It didn't match any call sign. It rode the exact entry arc required for the canyon loop, but tighter, lower. The pressure readings began to stack. Who authorized this flight? Davis barked. There's no clearance logged. The heat signature registered as Ghost 4. Who the hell is Ghost 4? A tech asked. The telemetry fed into the mainframe. Clean, uncorrupted. The speed matched the loop parameters. The HUD overlay showed a sharp climb, high G-hold nearing 9.4 and climbing. Ghost 4, identify yourself, Davis said. No reply. The screen showed the entry complete. Apex lock acquired. She's in the loop, Amanda whispered. Nobody moved. The radar Ghost 4's arc curved precisely into the compressed segment of the terrain model, the same place Brandon had blacked out. The G-curve rose again, 9.5, then 9.6. The drone lock came on screen, held steady. Full contact. She's holding, said Kevin from behind the analytics table. She's actually holding 9.6. The abort light froze. The operator who had reached for the switch stepped back. Ghost 4 held lock through the final corridor. The target. Flare triggered from the F-16's wingline. The drone's protocol engaged. Inside the sim, the red beacon showed target disruption, then collapse. The drone neutralized. Silence filled the command tent. Davis looked around the room. What just happened? No one answered. Every pilot seat was empty. Every controller still had their headset in place. The flight log updated once more, showing a completed intercept under call sign Ghost 4. Marcus leaned in over the edge of the screen and said it, not loud, but not soft either. Who flew that? The radar faded. The room stayed quiet. And somewhere over the terrain grid, Rachel's voice clicked out of the channel. No fanfare, no command call, just one final line. Returning to base. In the observation tent at Ridge Station 4, Rachel's chair sat empty, still warm. Her printout was gone. But everyone in the command tent had heard her voice, had watched the impossible happen on their screens. Someone had just flown the canyon loop perfectly, and they had no idea who. The terrain opened in a silent sweep below her, its jagged contours rendered in perfect resolution against the sim's synthetic sky. Rachel's F-16 cut through it low, almost scraping the valley floor with its belly, riding the entry arc at an angle too shallow for most pilots to stabilize. Her HUD blinked. Red across the top edge, G-pressure climbing, wind offset registering sharp right, lock window approaching. Inside the command tent, operators stared at the telemetry feed in growing stillness. Ghost 4 had no listed operator, no pre-filed approach, yet the signal was clean. Her entry speed was optimal, thrust output steady. From the moment her jet appeared on the screen, nothing faltered. The arc she flew traced the inside curve of the canyon loop tighter than any recorded simulation to date, said Amanda from her station, her voice low, almost reverent. Davis didn't reply. He was watching the G-load indicator, tracking the numbers rising faster than expected. 9.2, 9.3. Rachel adjusted pitch with the subtlest correction, pulling into the high-pressure segment of the loop with surgical precision. Her left hand nudged the throttle down just enough to edge the flare timing into the pocket. The HUD warning pulsed again. High load threshold. 9.4. No shake in the stick, no waver in breath rate. Her vitals held flat, steady. 9.5. Inside the sim, the terrain wrapped tighter. Most pilots would have blacked out. Her vision stayed sharp. Her suit compressed perfectly around her torso, the oxygen regulator feeding just fast enough to counteract the darkness creeping in at the edges of her eyes. 9.6. She held it. The lock cone on her HUD turned solid blue. In the telemetry stream, the phrase "target lock true" blinked on 3 separate feeds. Rachel's F-16 reached the apex of the loop with flawless control. Her wing dipped slightly, timing the bank with a pre-mapped thermal draft built into the sim code months ago. She knew it was there. She had placed it herself, buried in the parameters to mimic real-world physics. No one else had noticed. 300 meters from the drone model, she triggered a single flare burst. The bright streak cut across the visual feed, trailing in an arc just inside the fail-safe envelope. The drone responded immediately, its protocol. Flared, defensive systems override engaged. It began to break. The drone spun, lost cohesion, and self-neutralized. Inside the command tent, the red threat indicator blinked once, then vanished. Neutralized. No damage to the pilot. No further action required. Someone let out a breath. Another operator whispered, "What was that?" No one answered. Rachel didn't wait for confirmation. Her F-16 climbed out of the corridor with clean velocity, engine heat blooming across the thermal map in an even wave. She didn't pull hard. She didn't show off. She simply climbed. The silhouette of her jet broke through the upper cloud layer. As the loop sequence closed, from the outside it looked like a simple exit, no trail of fire, no sweeping bank, just a single engine climb through simulated mist, wings level. Inside her cockpit, the HUD cooled to green. Pressure dropped. Her vitals stayed unchanged. She had not spoken once. In the telemetry archive, the word "complete" logged beside her run. A single line. Operator ID Ghost 4. G-force held 9.6. Lock duration full. Outcome successful intercept. Override protocol. Not triggered. Inside the sim compound, the remaining pilots who had watched their own runs collapse into failure stood in silence. Marcus stared at the screen, jaw tight. Brandon was still seated on the edge of the secondary terminal, his headset hanging from his fingers. Jessica didn't say a word. "She held it," someone said from the back. Davis crossed his arms. No one else even came close. Kevin, who had slipped in halfway through the run, tapped the telemetry line and zoomed in on the flare release timing. "Look at that." She released exactly 2.9 seconds before protocol lock, right at the edge. "She didn't shoot," Amanda said. "She didn't have to," Kevin replied. "She made the system shut itself down." In the air, Rachel's jet banked slightly toward the right vector, aligning with a soft return path. Her voice never entered the comms. Again, no request for debrief, no demand for validation. One operator leaned toward the radar screen and whispered, "Who flew that?" No one had an answer. The flight board still showed her as unassigned. Her name didn't appear anywhere official, but the signature was there. The maneuver was real, and it had happened in full view of every system running. Davis stepped back from the screen and let the data speak. The log remained untouched. The outcome couldn't be challenged. She had done it. She had solved it live. In the corner of the room, someone replayed the loop on split screen. The F-16's angle through the corridor played out again. A perfect arc against the simulated terrain, the drone target reacting too late. A streak of light, a signal collapse, and then just sky. Outside, the early morning light pressed faintly through the tinted glass of the sim bay. The clouds were starting to rise, casting soft shadows over the flight pad. A single vapor trail marked the air above the loop corridor. No one knew where she had come from, but everyone knew what she had done. The impossible had just happened, and they had all witnessed it. The sim archive was still running a full diagnostic when Kevin pulled the telemetry feed from the mainframe. He stood over the terminal, eyes locked on the stream of clean data. Scrolling upward in green text, no lag, no interference. Every detail fed back into the record as if it had always been there, except the name. The call sign was Ghost 4. Operator ID, blank. Clearance, none. Completion, 100.0%. He didn't speak at first, he just stared at the loop metrics, watching the line labeled Lock Duration, Stay Flat all the way through. 9.6 G sustained, no instability, no blackout signal, flare release at 2.9 seconds, drone neutralized. Marcus pushed past him, half angry, half confused. "Pull the override, that run wasn't cleared, we don't know who flew it." Kevin didn't move. "It was a ghost profile," he said quietly. "Not new. This isn't the first loop logged under that ID." Marcus frowned. "Then it's some training plant, a test run from Ops." Amanda walked over without a word and handed Davis a folded printout. The page was thick, corners slightly creased, already. Marked up in pen, Davis opened it carefully. At the top was a terrain arc, a canyon loop rendering. Beneath it, a G-load chart annotated in tight handwriting. Entry speed, apex lock, flare trigger, exit climb. He studied the curve, the exact match. Amanda's voice was low. "She wrote that 3 weeks ago." Davis looked up at her. Amanda nodded once. "She flew it in the pod every morning before they showed up." Marcus snatched the page. His eyes skimmed the notations, then narrowed. "Where's the signature?" "There isn't one," Amanda said. "She never signed any of them." A second tech at the archive console leaned forward, tapping a key to expand the override log. One redacted entry blinked open with a soft tone. Override. Access. Quinn. Everyone fell silent. Marcus stepped back, one hand curling into a fist near his leg. "That's not possible," he said. "She doesn't have flight clearance. She's not even on the sim rotation." "She was," Kevin said. 6 weeks ago. Listed as support, then removed." Davis didn't look up from the flare timing printout. "She ran the loop more times than any of us." Brandon leaned over a second screen, watching the replay file run on loop. He said nothing, just let it play. The flare burst, the target lock, the drone collapsed. Every time it cycled, the same outcome. No deviation. "She flew it like she'd done it 100 times, someone said from the side. Davis answered without lifting his eyes. "Because she has." Jessica stepped in from the hallway, jacket half-zipped. Her expression had dropped from sharp to uncertain. She looked from the file to the screen, then to the line on the flight board where Marcus's name still held the top slot. Below it, a gap. No label, no entry. The sim system had logged Rachel's run as complete, but it had never assigned her a rank. "What are we supposed to do with that?" she asked. Marcus snapped the paper in his hand. "You can't let her get away. With this, she hijacked a live run." "She solved the run," Amanda said, "and she saved the mission." "That's not the point," Marcus snapped. "Isn't it?" Kevin cut in. His voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the noise. The sim feed was still open behind him. Ghost 4, 100.0%. Final result confirmed. Kevin crossed his arms. "You flew at 9.1, you pulled early. She held 9.6 clean." Marcus's jaw tightened. "She wasn't even supposed to be in the air," he said. "She didn't ask permission," Davis replied. "She just flew." The weight of the words settled across the tent. On the back monitor, the canyon loop arc replayed again. Rachel's flight path traced its way across the terrain model in a perfect bow. The lock held. The flare burst glowed. Then the target dissolved. Every frame exact. Someone brought up the archive listing. The loop data stretched back over 30 days. Dozens of runs, all logged under the same tag. No errors, no training flags, no debrief requests. "She solved it first," Amanda said. Kevin nodded. "We just didn't see it." Davis exhaled slowly and turned toward the terminal. He typed one line. "Into the mission record. No announcement, no fanfare. Operator. Quinn. Status. Complete." Behind him, the operators moved in quiet agreement. One by one, they began adjusting the data logs. The names shifted, the stats reordered. Marcus's failure moved to line 2, Jessica's overshoot to 3, Brandon's blackout to 4. Ghost 4 became the new line 1. No one argued. The tent held a stillness that didn't feel like defeat. It felt like the moment just after truth arrives. Too late to prepare for, too clean to deny. Marcus stared once more at the board, then turned and walked out without speaking. Jessica didn't follow. Brandon sat back in his chair and let the sim footage play again. Kevin walked to the far console, opened the sim record, and saved a backup copy to his drive. No one spoke for a long time. Only the soft hum of the systems remained, and the faint click of Amanda resetting the terminal for the next round. Not that it would matter. There would be no better run today. Rachel had already finished the loop and left them all watching. The sim bay was dark except for the blue glow of one terminal screen still blinking on standby. Most of the building had emptied out hours ago. The official debrief had ended just past 2300. By then, the replays had been watched twice, the mission logs had been archived, and every pilot had walked out slower than they came in. But Kevin had stayed. Something about the silence in the room pulled at him. He stepped inside quietly, not sure what he was looking for. The air was still faintly warm, the kind of heat left behind by long systems running at full load. Pod 6, the one furthest down the row, was cracked open an inch. The sim console beside it showed no user ID, just an unfiled session logged as Ghost 4. He moved to the console. A memory stick sat in the slot, the red light on its side still blinking. Still active, still warm. He didn't remove it. He touched the key once, and the sim session loaded. The Canyon loop file appeared at full render. It opened instantly. No. Password, no encryption. He read the name in the header line, not a code this time, not a number, just one word. Quinn. The data filled the screen. Full Canyon loop trajectory. G-force log peaking at 9.6 and holding steady for 7.2 seconds. Target lock held. Flare timing exact. Completion rating 100.0%. No assist, no automated correction, no fallback routine. He didn't sit. He didn't speak. He just stood there watching. The numbers run again, watching the shape of the arc play out in green lines across a black background. Quiet as breath. Every second was intentional, every motion deliberate. It was her, beginning to end. Outside, a soft vibration passed through the floor. He turned. Through the side windows of the bay, past the line of empty gear carts and closed. Hangar doors. A jet moved across the far runway. No lights, no tower request, no beacon ID. It moved smooth and fast, its shape familiar even in silhouette. F-16. One of the base birds, stripped of call sign, wheels already lifting. He stepped to the glass and watched. The engine flared once in the distance, then the jet rose clean into the night, its nose cutting through the lower cloud cover without sound. It climbed at a soft angle, not showy, not urgent, but with certainty. The kind that didn't ask permission. On the tower deck above the sim compound, Amanda stood with her jacket zipped to the chin, her hands in her pockets. She saw it too. No headset, no contact, just the single trail climbing through the dark. She didn't reach for the radio. She just watched. The terminal beside Kevin gave a final beep. The session closed. The screen returned to standby. The memory stick light blinked once more, then went dark. He left it there. In the locker room, one cabinet remained open. Inside, a folded flight suit sat clean on the shelf, gloves resting neatly above it. No name on the tag, no patch on the sleeve, just the faint indent of wear. The boots were gone. Someone had cleared out without making noise. There was no note, no trail, no message left on the board, only the record and the silence that followed. On the ops deck, the team that had once joked about who could hold the loop the longest now sat scattered, none of them speaking. The loop had been held, not by any of them. Davis had archived the result himself. Operator, Quinn, mission, complete. There would be meetings, protocols reviewed, questions raised about oversight, access, clearance, but none of that could undo what had already happened because it had happened in front of all of them. And it had happened clean. By the time the control tower filed its midnight report, the unidentified lift had already cleared range, no flight path filed, no tracking beacon active, but the radar confirmed a single aircraft exiting at controlled climb. Course unknown. The night air outside the bay was still cool, not quite cold. Above the sim roofline, the vapor trail cut through the sky like a soft line drawn with certainty. She had left the record, not the explanation. Her name had never needed the board, and now, without a word, she was gone. But they would remember the climb. The briefing room felt different the next morning. Word had spread overnight through unofficial channels, whispered conversations in the mess hall, hurried text messages between pilots, hushed phone calls to friends at other bases. By Aero 600, the story had taken on a life of its own. Ghost pilot executes perfect canyon loop. Unknown operator saves mission simulation. Mystery F-16 disappears after flawless run. Colonel James Patterson arrived at 0630, his face stern, and his stride purposeful. He wasn't supposed to be there. The canyon loop was a training exercise, not a command-level operation. But when word reached him that an unauthorized pilot had hijacked a live simulation and then vanished, he made it his business. Davis stood at attention as Patterson entered the command tent. The morning shift was already in place, but the energy was subdued. Everyone knew what was coming. "Explain to me," Patterson said without preamble, "how someone flies an unauthorized mission using our equipment, our simulation, and our airspace, and then disappears without a trace." Davis cleared his throat. "Sir, the pilot in question executed a successful canyon loop intercept. Mission parameters were met. The drone threat was neutralized." "That's not what I asked, Controller Davis." Patterson's voice was ice. "I asked how it happened." The room fell silent. Patterson's eyes swept across the assembled personnel. Davis, Amanda, Kevin, and several other techs. Marcus, Jessica, and Brandon stood near the back, their expressions carefully neutral. The pilot, identified as Ghost 4, Davis continued, accessed the simulation during an active training exercise. Based on telemetry analysis, the execution was flawless. No safety protocols were violated. No safety protocols? Patterson's eyebrows rose. An unidentified pilot takes control of a live simulation, flies without clearance, and vanishes without debrief, and you're telling me no protocols were violated? Amanda stepped forward. "Sir, if I may, the pilot in question has been training on this simulation for weeks. The access was unofficial, but the competency was verified." Patterson turned to her. "Unofficial access? You mean unauthorized?" "Yes, sir." "And you allowed this?" Amanda's jaw tightened. "The pilot demonstrated exceptional skill, sir. far beyond the capabilities of our scheduled operators. That's not your call to make, Lieutenant Pierce. Marcus couldn't stay quiet any longer. Sir, with respect, this pilot made a mockery of the entire exercise. She bypassed command structure, ignored clearance protocols, and showed off at the expense of legitimate pilots. Patterson's gaze shifted to Marcus. She? The word hung in the air. Marcus realized his mistake immediately, but it was too late. You know who this pilot is, Patterson said. It wasn't a question. Kevin stepped forward, a tablet in his hand. Sir, I have the complete telemetry data from yesterday's exercise. All 3 authorized pilots failed to complete the canyon loop. The unauthorized pilot, call sign Ghost 4, executed the maneuver perfectly. 9.6 G sustained, full lock duration, clean intercept. Patterson took the tablet and reviewed the data. His expression remained unreadable. Pilot identification? Quinn, sir, Amanda said quietly. Rachel Quinn, former SIM support, currently unassigned. Where is she now? Unknown, sir. She left base last night. No flight plan filed. Patterson handed the tablet back to Kevin. So let me understand this. A pilot with no current assignment, no flight clearance, and no authorization executed a maneuver that 3 of our active pilots failed to complete. Then she disappeared. That's correct, sir. Patterson was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was measured. Bring me everything. Every sim log, every training record, every piece of data related to this pilot and the canyon. Loop exercise, I want a complete analysis on my desk by 1400. Yes, sir. And I want Quinn found. Issue a recall order. She's to report for immediate debrief. Davis nodded. We'll put out the word, sir. You'll do more than that, Controller. You'll make it clear that unauthorized access to military simulations is a serious offense. There will be consequences. But even as Patterson spoke, everyone in the room knew the truth. Rachel Quinn had done something none of them could do. She had solved the unsolvable, executed the impossible, and proven that sometimes the best pilot isn't the one with the highest rank or the most clearances. She was the one who could fly. As Patterson left the briefing room, Amanda turned to Kevin. Think they'll find her? Kevin shook his head. She's been invisible for weeks. Why would that change now? Outside, the morning sun cast long shadows across the flight line. Somewhere in the distance, the sound of jet engines echoed across the base, but the distinctive roar of an F-16 executing a perfect canyon loop was nowhere to be heard. Rachel Quinn had made her point. Now she was gone. 3 weeks later, the recall order was quietly canceled. The official reason was assignment restructuring due to operational requirements. The unofficial reason was that Rachel Quinn had never responded to any communication, and attempts to locate her had yielded nothing. She had simply vanished, as if she had never existed at all. But her simulation data remained. The canyon loop exercise was eventually modified based on her telemetry. The timing sequences she had perfected became the new standard. The G-load profiles she had mapped were integrated into the training protocol. Her ghost runs became the benchmark against which all future pilots would be measured. Kevin found himself assigned to analyze her data full-time. It became a kind of obsession, reverse engineering perfection, trying to understand how someone could hold 9.6 G for over 7 seconds without losing consciousness or control. He published papers on her techniques. Other bases requested copies of her simulation logs. She became a legend without ever having a name attached to it. Amanda was transferred to a different base 6 months later. On her last day, she left. A small package in locker 427, the one Rachel had used during her ghost sessions. Inside was the original memory stick with all 37 canyon loop runs, along with a handwritten note. For the pilot who proved that skill matters more than permission. Marcus, Jessica, and Brandon eventually completed modified versions of the canyon loop, but their best runs never came close to Ghost 4's perfect execution. Marcus was reassigned to transport operations. Jessica moved to reconnaissance. Brandon found success in air-to-air combat training. None of them ever spoke publicly about what they had witnessed that morning. Colonel Patterson's investigation concluded with a classified report that was filed and forgotten. The official finding was unauthorized access to training facilities by qualified personnel, resulting in successful mission completion. No disciplinary action was recommended, partly because there was no one left to discipline, but Patterson kept a copy of Rachel's telemetry data in his personal files. Sometimes, late at night in his office, he would pull up the canyon loop footage and watch Ghost 4's perfect arc across the simulated terrain. He had been flying for 25 years, and he had never seen anything like it. 2 years later, reports began surfacing from other military installations, a ghost pilot appearing during training exercises. Perfect execution of impossible maneuvers. No identification, no communication, no trace. Always the same pattern. Arrive unannounced, execute flawlessly, disappear without explanation. The pilots who witnessed these events never filed official reports, but they talked among themselves in quiet corners of officers' clubs and break rooms. They called her the Canyon Pilot, or sometimes just Ghost. Some claimed she was a test pilot for a classified program. Others insisted she was a former ace who had gone rogue. Kevin knew better. He recognized the flight patterns, the G-load signatures, the impossible precision. It was Rachel Quinn, still flying, still perfect, still proving that the best pilots don't need recognition or rank or official approval, they just need to fly. On a quiet Tuesday morning, 5 years after the original Canyon Loop incident, Kevin received an encrypted file in his email. No sender information, no message, just a single video file labeled Loop 127. He opened it in his private office, door locked, volume low. The footage showed an F-16 executing a canyon loop at night, over real terrain, not simulation. The G-force readings in the corner of the screen peaked at 9.8 G, higher than anyone had ever achieved. The maneuver was flawless, the timing perfect, the execution beyond human capability. At the end of the video, just before the aircraft climbed, out of frame, the HUD displayed a brief message. Still flying, still perfect, RQ. Kevin smiled and deleted the file. Some legends don't need proof, some pilots don't need recognition. Some truths are powerful enough to speak for themselves. Rachel Quinn had shown them all that real excellence doesn't ask for permission. It simply is. She had proven that the quiet ones, the overlooked ones, the ones who train in silence and perfect their craft alone, are often the ones who can do the impossible when it matters most. She was never picked, never announced, never handed a call sign or a headline. But when everything faltered, she flew. While others trained for the spotlight, she prepared for the moment. Alone, unseen. And when it came, she didn't ask permission. She simply held the line. Years later, when new pilots asked about the canyon loop record, instructors would pull up the telemetry data from Ghost 4. They wouldn't mention her name, most didn't know it, but they would point to the perfect arc, the sustained G-force, the flawless execution, and say simply, "This is what perfection looks like." What Rachel proved was not just mastery of a maneuver, but something deeper, the quiet strength of someone who knows exactly what they can do and does it without applause. This wasn't about recognition, it was about truth. Her truth held steady through 9.6 G in silence. Maybe you know someone like her, maybe you are her. Someone who perfects their craft in the quiet hours, who prepares not for glory, but for the moment when excellence is demanded. Someone who understands that the loudest achievements often come from the quietest preparation. If this story moved you, remember, the best pilots aren't always the ones with their names on the board. Sometimes they're the ones who fly perfect loops in the darkness, leaving only the memory of impossible excellence and the knowledge that somewhere out there, true skill speaks for itself. The sky remembers what the scoreboards forget. And legends, like Rachel Quinn, remind us that real greatness doesn't need permission, it just needs the courage to fly. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and become a part of our Everyday Life Stories community. Where are you watching from? Drop a comment below. We love hearing from our amazing viewers around the world. Have you ever witnessed someone achieve the impossible when no one was looking? Share your own stories of quiet excellence in the comments. And if this tale of silent strength and earned respect resonated with you, check out our other incredible stories of people who proved their worth when it mattered most. Remember to ring that notification bell so you never miss our latest uploads featuring real-life heroes, underdogs who rise to the occasion, and stories that remind us that sometimes the most powerful victories happen in silence. Thanks for being part of our community, and we'll see you in the next story.